Alright, this is Block 2, America Becomes a World Power, Section 3, the Spanish-American War, the section with Commodore Dewey, the Battle of Santiago, and the Rough Riders. So now the United States is at war with Spain. And although all of the run-up to the war had taken place all about Cuba, the first action of the war actually took place half a world away in the Philippines. The Philippines, along with Cuba, were the other large Spanish colony that was left in 1898. The commander of the American the Asiatic Squadron, as it was called, was a man by the name of Commodore George Dewey. He was alerted to the possibility of war by Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Teddy Roosevelt. And pretty much Roosevelt said, war is coming, start sailing towards the Philippines. I will telegraph you when war is declared, and then we want you to destroy the Spanish fleet as quickly as you can. When war came, Commodore Dewey's fleet was ready. The Spanish fleet was not ready. Commodore Dewey entered Manila Bay. His famous line, "You may fire at will, Gridley," and Gridley fired at will. Within an hour, all 10 Spanish ships were destroyed, while only one single American lost his life in this battle, and that was due to heat stroke. So now the Spanish force guarding the Philippines was destroyed. Reinforcements in the form of army and soldiers and marines arrived to capture Manila in August. The Filipino leader, a nationalist by the name of Emilio Aguinaldo, assisted the Americans at the beginning. He assisted the Americans in capturing Manila, the Philippine capital, from what was left of the Spanish forces, and all of a sudden, within a few weeks of the war breaking out in 1898, the United States is in control of a massive territory, thousands upon thousands of miles away from the United States. To get a sense of where the Philippines are, if you don't know, they're a long way away. They're south of Japan. Here are the Philippines. You can see them. It's a huge archipelago. There's Japan right north of the Philippines. Hawaii is all the way over here. And the United States is all the way over here. That is an entire crossing of the Pacific Ocean that all of a sudden this territory, and if we zoom in you can see just how many islands there are, was now in control, or controlled by, the United States. Now let's shift our focus back to Cuba, which is where the war was going to be decided one way or another. Spain sends its overmatched ships to defend Cuba, but the American Navy traps them in Santiago Bay. With the Spanish Navy then trapped, the United States was able to send an army from the United States to Cuba. And the army gathered in Tampa, Florida. The American army in 1898, let's put this perfectly frankly, was a catastrophe. The American army had not experienced large-scale fighting since the Civil War. The previous 30 years fighting had been against Indians on the frontier. Now all of a sudden trying to organize a modern army to face a modern Europe, or a somewhat modern European power, was a disaster. In the Tampa heat, all the uniforms that arrived were wool. There was the wrong size bullets for the guns. Stuff so old that it had been old during the Civil War rolled in. It was a colossal mess. The American General-in-Chief was so fat that he had to be carried around on a litter by orderlies, by servants. And he did not like to be in the heat either. He spent all of his time inside. It was a colossal mess. But eventually an army did land near Santiago, Cuba. And it could land because the Spanish Navy had been bottled up in Santiago Harbor. Well, the Spanish Navy began to run low on coal. And the Spanish Navy decided that it would much rather go down fighting than have to surrender. Also, the American Army was approaching from the rear, so in a valiant effort, the Spanish fleet sailed out of Santiago, tried to escape the American blockade. You can kind of see from this map here, the Spanish ships come out of Santiago and try to run along the coast, but the American ships catch up, and in a running battle destroyed all 10 ships. The Spanish Navy was completely destroyed. Not a single American ship was lost. Now, the United States was ready to attack Spanish land forces. The American Army landed and approached Santiago from the rear, coming in this way along the coast to Santiago in the rear. That's where the Spanish Army was, in Santiago. As disorganized as the Americans were, they were brave. They cut through the Spanish defenses. Some of the toughest fighting was done by a regiment known as the Rough Riders, and they're a famous example in history. Theodore Roosevelt, who was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, resigned his post as Assistant Secretary of the Navy and gathered together a regiment of volunteer cowboys, hardy characters, upper-class New York, scions of important families, and on his own money took this regiment to Cuba and said, hey, we're here. And one of the key moments in the battle was the charge up what came to be known as San Juan Hill. It was actually Kettle Hill. But Teddy Roosevelt, riding his horse, that was true, at the front of this line, charged his volunteers up this hill, broke the Spanish line, and helped the Americans to victory. After Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders' success, the Spanish Army in Santiago soon surrendered, and Spanish resistance was at an end. And that was pretty much the entire war. It was called by a famous American a splendid little war. It was quick, it was easy, not too many people died, and it achieved every possible objective that the United States had wanted. It was now up to the United States and Spain to come up with some degree of a peace settlement.